good evening, everybody. We're back for another edition of Meteorology Lab, and yeah, this is what the scene looked like yesterday. If I showed you today's footage, it would just look like a bunch of grayness. We've actually got cloudy skies here, and north winds. That front has come through, and the charts are looking like this. Looks like we got a pretty well wound up occluded system up there in Ontario. You can see that right up there. And the frontal systems are pretty classic. The cold front extending from about Pittsburgh down to about Chattanooga, Atlanta, and then about to New Orleans, and then to South Texas. So that's going to be our cold front. And the warm front, you can see that's a little less obvious. We've got the warmer air down in Florida, the Carolinas, but we pass the thickness lines, the red lines here, very gradually. We can't find a location where they're very packed together. It does look like they're a little bit tighter up here in Maine and New England. And there is a little bit of troughing. You can see that difference in the slope right there in Maine. So I'm going to go with a position maybe from a triple point around Vermont to Portland and just offshore. And that leaves the remainder of that system. That doesn't look good. Yeah, more like that right there. That would be an occluded front extending up into that low there in Ontario. So behind that, you can see the cold air sweeping in behind from Minnesota to the Great Lakes. And the main trajectory of that cold air is pretty well to the east. So we don't have a lot of cold air here in Texas. In fact, as you saw, the temperature is only 52 here. So we're going to start getting into the warm advection back on the other side. That's going to start dominating the weather in the next few days. Although we do have a bit of a Pacific system sitting over Washington and British Columbia. So that could also dominate some of the weather here. So it may be kind of a slow pattern to change for the next few days. There's that precipitation there in the northeast. You can see the heavier convective elements are near that triple point. And you might remember how I was listing out the cities. I was telling you Pittsburgh, Atlanta, South Texas. Doing that kind of helps you transpose the information. So that makes it pretty easy to draw out where the front is on the radar chart. I didn't do that for Quebec or Ontario, but just taking a guess, I think the occluded system was kind of like that with the low right up there. And we were looking for that warm front somewhere around Vermont to Portland, so right up in there. So yeah, pretty close to that triple point. And in fact, it's helpful to not think of these as fronts, but boundaries between air masses. So the warmest and the most buoyant air is located right here in this sector. It forms kind of a wedge. So at the very tip, where it's closest to the upper level dynamics, that's where we have the heavier precip. So everything kind of matches there. Okay, let me take a quick look at the chat and make sure we're looking good. Make sure we don't have any microphones off. And it's pretty customary for me to put up the satellite. So let me do that. And I didn't get one loaded up here. I need to fix these images since they're doing some stuff here with these satellites. We'll pick goes west there. And then we'll get these loaded. Okay, we'll take 10 frames with a low zoom factor, and let's launch that there. Okay, so there's the view this evening, and wow, we've got a lot of moisture heading into Texas. You can see that right there. So we're going to need to look at that a little bit more closely, and it looks like even we may have a shortwave or some sort of trough down off the coast of Baja California. You can see that S shape. That's kind of an indicator that we may have some upper level dynamics out there in the Pacific. Okay, Ron Chalfant, Southern California, says it's a busy day down there. 60-mile-an-hour winds and several major fires. Over 60,000 acres so far and 150-plus homes burned down. Well, that's definitely some bad news there. He says he's in a mountain community, so he's always nervous during these weather events. Electric Dog is with us, and so is Fun with Tech, Alexi Pinkson Walsh. Megan John says it's back to feeling like winter in Minnesota, blustery with 16 degrees. Jeff Krob, the Wind Grids author, in fact, might as well put that up here. Wind Grids, that's a excellent program for looking at model data. You can basically roll your own, and the site there, windweather.org. And you can see that it's basically a free software package, and you can pretty much be right up there with the big websites with your graphics and look at fields that are hard to find, like Q vectors. That's pretty difficult to find on the internet, and you can basically just come up with your own. The manual that comes with it is about 300 pages, so definitely a lot to go through. It's a very capable software package. All right, Brett Dean, 60 degrees, rainy in southern Jersey. Brett Dean right there is in that warm wedge that we talked about. Mason Willits is with us, and David Moore says the front blew through the Metroplex. Yeah, it came through in the middle of the night last night here, huge gust of wind. Adam Davis reporting cold front is arrived in western Pennsylvania. A lot of wind there also. Brett Dean asks, when the front is occluded, does the cold front overtake the warm front? Well, depending on what kind of occluded front it is, the cold front will either ride up and over the warm front if the cold air ahead of it is colder. But if the cold air on the backside is colder, then you have basically a cold occlusion where the warm front rides up and over the cold front. It's probably easier to talk about that with graphics. Let's see, we've got Mike Estwick with us. Brian Toomey's reporting the California wildfires kicking up around Ventura. Ron Chalfant reporting audio and video is good. Brian Toomey's reading the advisories. Sarah Wood there in Indiana. Cold front passed through there. Temperatures in the 50s. Yep, there's that cold air right there. Pretty much hitting Michigan dead on. Mike Estwick reporting cold temperatures in Denver. Managed 50 degrees there. And Ron Chalfant reporting more strong Santa Ana winds. Let's see if we can take a look at that. In fact, we'll start with a top-down approach. This is the North American picture, and you can see that big wound-up low there in Ontario. So the cold front is going to be extending down from Pennsylvania right on down to the Gulf Coast. And the occluded front up to the north, and likely that's going to be a warm occlusion up in that area right there. And lots of high pressure all the way back to the western U.S., and this is the area that we're focusing on, and we can already see that there is a pretty good pressure gradient from North Nevada to Southern California. Let's take a closer look at that. In fact, there are some rules of thumb that you can use for Santa Ana. That's taking the pressure at Winnemucca or Elko and comparing that with the pressure at Los Angeles. So along the line like that, and when you surpass a certain amount of pressure change, then you have Santa Ana conditions. So obviously that gives us a pressure gradient flowing from the higher terrain into the Southern California area, kind of an offshore wind. And you can see that the Santa Ana does not show too well on the synoptic charts, but if you get down in there with the mesoscale charts, you will find the higher gusts here and there. San Joaquin Valley showing temperatures in the 40s, so yeah, there is cold air infiltrating that region. And then taking things into the central U.S., high pressure settling in across southern Oklahoma. That's going to drift to the southeast into East Texas, so it should be kind of a cold night in that area. And then out in the eastern U.S., you can see those very strong gusty winds. I don't have the gusts on here, but the sustained winds are up to 20 knots around the Detroit area. And then the leading edge of that front looks like from about Charlotte down to south of Atlanta. And there's a little bit of a wave that appears there. I don't know if I'm imagining that, but that tells me that there could be something coming together right there. It could be a little stable wave, maybe something transitory, but that's something we would look at in more detail. Okay, let's head into the forecast overnight, and I think we'll just take a quick look from west to east. There's California there. Conditions at this moment look like this. You can see the cold air up there in the plateau region, north winds at Vegas, and some of those north winds spilling out into the Mojave Desert and down the Colorado River. And even at Phoenix, northeast winds. So overnight, things are going to look like this. By dawn, temperatures will be down to about 34 there in Vegas and 52 in Phoenix. And then during the day, just kind of a warm up there, continued north wind, still draining out that cold air. And then looks like another cold night. A lot of freezing temperatures there in the deserts. And then for the day on Thursday, continued north winds there. So very persistent pattern. And wow, there's if you look down in Mexico, there's some strong winds there. Got to keep in mind this is sustained. So we're seeing sustained winds here of about 35 knots. That's that cold air just kind of rushing down through that region. I'm trying to find where the strongest winds are. Yeah, probably in there. This is going to be for Thursday morning. So I'm seeing 35 knots. So there's probably some gusts up to almost 50. And that gives you some idea of just the volume of cold air that's locked up there in Nevada and is now spilling southward. Okay, elsewhere for the rest of the country, let me take a quick look in Texas. You can definitely see that front. Hang on a second, let me get this where you can read the legend. Okay, wow, yeah. That's pretty impressive there. That's the leading edge of that cold front. And there it is moving down into the Gulf Coast region, and the current chart is right about there. So offshore where the oil wells are, off the coast of Houston, getting some pretty high gusts in that region. And there's that high pressure area right there in the Red River region. So during the day tomorrow, looks like a, wow, this is interesting. A lot of cold air across central and south Texas there. I think this is cold. This is overcast, I think. And then up further to the north, along the leading edge of this reinforcing shot, I think there's some fair weather. So temperatures are coming up to almost 60 there in the Red River. But they stay down in the 40s in San Antonio and Austin. And this is a map here for 2 p.m. So by 4 p.m., only come up to 44 there. Only 42 in Lufkin. Wow, this is colder. Whoop. I don't know how that happened. All right, there we go. Yeah, it looks like we're going to stay in the 40s all day in parts of Texas. And then this reinforcing shot of cold air comes down. And you can see that working down into northeast Texas. And there it goes out into the Gulf Coast area. And let me see what the temperatures in Texas look like. Looks like Thursday morning we start out with temperatures near freezing in the DFW area. And then kind of a rapid warm-up, so I think we're clearing away some of the clouds. At least I think so. I think this is all cloud here. No, I'm sorry, that would be... Those are warmer temperatures. Okay, that would probably be some clearing, and then maybe some upslope clouds in West Texas. In fact, the winds are kind of easterly right there. That's upslope flow there in the Fort Stockton area. So I think that is actually a region of clouds in that area. Okay, elsewhere in the country, southeast U.S. also getting that front. We'll just kind of watch that sink through that area. Yeah, there is that area of, looks like maybe a little cyclogenesis in western Georgia. And the front continues pushing down into Florida. And then by Thursday morning, looks like it's just make it into the Orlando and Tampa area. And that leaves a little wedge of warm air around Fort Myers off to the south, 80 degrees there for Thursday. And then I think Thursday night it should remove through the remainder of Florida. Okay, the Northeast, things are pretty active. There's the current map showing the system moving through western New York. So that's just going to move very quickly through the remainder of New England. It should be completely through the area by dawn. And back to cold weather there. And then we can see to the north, looks like a reinforcing shot, much colder temperatures up in that area. This is temperatures in the single digits Fahrenheit. So this is a Thursday early morning, and looks like most of it stays trapped up there in Quebec and Ontario. So fairly mild conditions this time of year for New York. And then a quick look at the Midwest. Just a lot of cold air advection coming through that area. There's the overnight hours. Some of that cold air starts moving down into Minnesota and Iowa in highs tomorrow afternoon. Looks like 20s for Minneapolis, 34 for Chicago, 44 for St. Louis, and 39 for Indianapolis. And then a cold night, but it looks like temperatures are pretty steady there in the 20s and 30s. So that's the weather picture region by region. The upper level analysis looking like this. Very strong polar front jet coming down from Canada. This here, I don't know whether that's a polar front jet or a subtropical jet, but there is something there. I think there is support there for a polar front jet at least. One way we can figure that out is to just look at lower levels. 500 millibars showing 50 knots. Okay, that's probably a polar front jet. Subtropical jets are usually not deep enough to extend down into the mid-levels. So we got a bit of a split flow pattern here, and looks like a mid-level low pressure system there over Southern California due to all the cold air. And then down at 850 millibars, 5,000 feet. Showing a similar picture to what we have there at the surface. Lots of cold air advection coming back in on the weak side. And we can see that cold air mass source region across Idaho, Utah, and Nevada there. Okay, so yeah, it's pretty cut and dry. Just the system moving through the rest of the East Coast area and high pressure following in behind. So with that, I think we can probably take a look at the forecast. So let's head into that. Okay, there's our charts there from Pivotal Weather, showing the GFS panel. So there's our front. And let's see what happens overnight. Cold air advection in the Great Lakes. And looks like we are developing a little bit of isentropic lift precip in Texas. And it looks like the aerial coverage increases overnight. And then for the day tomorrow, looks like cloudy and a bit rainy in Texas. Cold front moving into Florida right there. Things start to calm down a bit there in the Midwest and Great Lakes. And we just advect the rest of that cold air there into the Great Lakes. Thursday into Friday. Yeah, looks like we get a little bit of cyclogenesis there in the Gulf of Mexico area. There's something coming up through Florida. Looks like things are going to be unsettled Thursday into Friday. And then we see the development of a frontal system moving up the coast along the Gulf Stream waters there. Reinforcing shot of cold air coming into the Midwest. Let me see if I can find where that is. There it is. I guess the leading edge is probably something like this. This looks occluded. So I'm going to go with something like that there for this Alberta Clipper. And then I'll move into the northeast U.S. on Friday into Saturday. Things start to warm up very slowly in Texas and the western U.S. But high pressure still covering a lot of this region here. This is all a huge high pressure area. So for Sunday, high across Mississippi, and another high there in the Great Basin area. So next week, Monday and Tuesday, we get some more cold air coming south. Looks like things are warming up there in Texas. Then more cold air comes southward there for Tuesday. And some of that reinforcing cold air develops a frontal system there in the southeast U.S. right there. You can see that coming together off the coast and then moving up the Gulf Stream region. So a little bit of snow showers there in the New York City and Long Island area. And looks like we have another Alberta Clipper showing up. I drew the front a little bit to the west because it looks like the main thermal gradient is to the west of this low pressure area. This looks like it's kind of occluded already for some reason. And as a result, it looks like it kind of weakens. Another shot comes in. This looks a little bit more linked up with the thermal gradients. This comes southward on Friday the 15th. And looks like a big shot comes in for the 18th. And this has got a lot of cold air in the western U.S., British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon. So this could be a major western U.S. event there. So there's a bunch of cold air coming south for the 19th. Wow, our charts are starting to get within range of the Christmas dates. GFS already extending up to the 21st there, so yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. Definitely looks active as we get into the middle of the year. Okay, one last look at the chat before we go. Ron Chalfont asking about whether the book's done, and yes, the book is finally finished, and there's what it looks like. You should be able to go online at weathergraphics.com and pick up a copy. It's 248 printed pages, and that covers basically what you see there: SKUTs, photographs, and severe weather indices. And it's got a lot of new stuff that is not printed anywhere, especially stuff like working with Sharpie, which is becoming pretty popular. So yeah, please check that out and pick up a copy. So now we can start focusing on weather, and I can start catching up on everything that's I've fallen behind on over the past several weeks. Oh yeah, also, yeah, please support the webcast. I haven't put this up for a while, but I need to remind you this really helps things out as far as the stream goes. So please, I need your Patreon donations. Patreon.com/MetLab. All right, Sarah Wood reporting it's been very windy there the past couple of days. Been under a wind advisory there. Alexei reporting a few cold nights there. Thomas Copeland says he made it in tonight. Ryan Toomey's looking for a weather change there in Florida. Things will be pretty active there. Lexi says, don't forget to hit that like button. And Ryan, glad to hear that it's finished. And thank you. Yeah, Brett Dean, Electric Dog, Burl H., Jeff Krob, Lexi, and Ron says, time to order the book. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you very much, and I will get back to work and start catching up on things. Anyway, take care, and we will talk to you tomorrow.